like this room. A little more room, not quite as packed as we were last week, so just a bit further for you to walk. Before we get too far into the program, and I might forget, if any of you parked on the street around Satapoy and need to get out afterwards, I have a key to open the gate. Welcome. This morning we're going to be talking about scholarships and financial aid. So quite long program. So before we get started, a couple of real quick announcements. We did run out of this flyer, but it is posted on your child's Blackboard site. This is the flyer for the college fair. We have a joint college fair with 6 other Catholic high schools. It's this coming Saturday, October 26th at Cal State Northridge, and it's from 10 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon. The first hour from 10 to 11 of meeting with the college admissions officers is restricted to seniors only to give them a little advantage of meeting the admissions people. But the workshops start at 10 o'clock. So you're more than welcome to come at 10 and go to a workshop on the UC system, Cal State system, NCAA, there's a few others. There are over 110 college admissions officers coming to meet with the students this Saturday. The downside is it is homecoming dance Saturday night. So hopefully the students will come during the day and then go home and get ready for the dance. So this is on Blackboard under the counseling class. So just ask your child if you don't have their password to get onto Blackboard. There are extra flyers in the counseling office as well. Second quick announcement is, how many junior parents are here? Quite a few. There was an email sent out a little while ago about Case Studies Night. Case Studies Night is like a mock admissions evening for you and your child. The packets, this is the packet. These are sold in the counseling office. They're $10 a piece to participate. We actually feed the admission officers who come and run this event for us, so there is a charge. What you're going to be doing is you and your child will each need a packet that evening. Before you come, you need to read the 4 mock applications, decide which one student you'd admit, which one you deny, and which one you'd waitlist, and you have to deny the others. Then when you get there, you're in a session with other parents, the students are in a session with other students, and they discuss the strengths and weaknesses of each application, while your junior still has time to do something about boosting up their weak spots that they might have on an application. So it's a great experience. It takes place at Providence High School in Burbank. If you're interested and you haven't purchased one yet, they're in the guidance office. You can pick them up after the meeting. The date on that? It's November 6th. It's a Wednesday night, yes.
Is this something more for junior parents?
It's only for juniors. It's just for juniors. I'd like to introduce Mrs. Cowgill, one of our college counselors, to get started. Yes.
Just one real quick question. Those sessions, 10 o'clock, is it from 10 to 11 they have those workshops?
No,
or
they
those
have them
workshops
back
all
to
day?
back to back, all the way through, 10 to 1.
Good morning. This morning we are going to be going over ways to assist you as parents to fund or help fund your child's education. How many of you here have had or currently have a child in college? Anyone? So, as you can attest, colleges are very expensive, no matter where they are, whether it's a state school or out of state or private school. Some are more expensive than others, but it is indeed a very daunting thought to start paying these bills. And we're going to talk a little bit about, my part is kind of an overview and talking about some of the terms that you will hear in the financial aid process, and then we'll kind of get into it in a little bit more detail, and at the end provide you with some resources to find scholarships and things outside the realm of the actual colleges. So we like to start with a few warnings, if you will. The first one is we are not financial advisors. We are college counselors and guidance counselors, and so the information we are providing you is based on what we know as far as the education system. Everyone's going to have a different situation depending on your personal financial situation. So if you currently have someone that is your financial advisor, that might be the most appropriate person to ask those very specific questions of accounts that have numbers and letters attached to them and all kinds of rules attached to them. So just that, which is the second thing. The other thing I want to mention is we have seen a rise in the last, I want to say 3 years, in companies that not only are seeking your business as far as doing college counseling outside, but are also providing guidance in the funding, scholarship search process. And they make some pretty lofty statements of what they can achieve. And so we would like you to be very aware of what those companies are. They are companies that are trying to get your business. And so if you get something that you are contemplating maybe using, they can often be very expensive. My suggestion would be you might want to ask one of us if it's worth it, and usually the response is going to be, no, it's not. They guarantee things that no one can guarantee, and I've had a few families pay some pretty high fees and be very unhappy with the results. So something we just want you to be aware of. We're not telling you absolutely not. I'm sure there are companies out there that are reputable, but just please beware and be careful of that. And we are here, to offer our advice on that if that comes across your desk. Okay. So college costs. For those of you that have started or have kids in college or started looking at we like to call it the sticker price on colleges, we all know that it can be really expensive. So there's basically two costs that we use to determine what you're paying for in college. The direct costs, of course, are things like tuition, fees, those kind of things. Housing, most if they're not living at home, you're going to have housing costs. And then we have the indirect costs, which are all the incidentals, which seem to add up, very rapidly as well. Books are very expensive on the college level. They're expensive here. They get even more expensive when you move on to college. I know, it's like, you're like, how can it be more expensive? But it is. Transportation. If your child is not living, at a drivable distance from home, the reality is you are going to be paying for airfare back and forth. And then the thought of, if you can only afford to do that once a semester, is your child okay being that far away from home? Or are you okay with your child being that far away from home, which is usually the bigger issue, right? So those two things together, your direct cost and your indirect costs, are what constitutes the cost of attendance in the whole formula that exists for financial aid. Okay, and again, the cost varies from college to college on what the actual tuition is. So we have schools that can be anywhere for all of this, upwards of $60,000 a year, and some that are more in the 20 to 30. Okay, I know it's very depressing and scary, right? Okay. So this is another term that you frequently hear, and it's called the expected family contribution. And when you look on some websites, they don't even bother to explain it to you. It just says EFC, like you're supposed to know what it means. So I want to take a second to explain to you what that is. And basically, it is the amount that once you calculate on the FAFSA, which is the government form that is sent to any college that you are requesting financial aid from, it is basically saying that after we've taken into consideration everything you make, your debt, your property holdings, businesses, assets, this is what we are saying you can contribute every year to your child's college education. Now, as a parent who's gone through this process, the expected family contribution is always startling. Because you're like, I don't have that laying around. Like, I use that to pay bills, or I use that to, to live off of. So that can be, disconcerting oftentimes, but this is why we're going to give you some advice, is, to find out some outside sources to help, kind of fund that part of it, okay? And then there is sometimes, depending on the student's financial situation, with most of our students, this is not an issue, but if the student has funds, the student contribution to their education as well. Okay, so this, like I said, is calculated from the FAFSA form, which is a form that every parent will fill out. This is done in their senior year in January. So for those of you that have seniors, this will be something that we will remind you of closer to January. And for the rest of you, you don't have to worry about it yet, but just know it's coming. It looks really similar, the questions they ask, to your tax return, okay? And actually they reference lines in your tax return. And so it's not, I won't say it's not time consuming or horrible, but there are worse things in life. So it just takes a little time and making sure you have all your stuff together to do that. So the expected family contribution is always going to stay the same at every college, no matter the cost at the college. Okay? So what they expect you, if you're going to a college that costs $30,000 more than another one, the expected family contribution is going to remain the same, and therefore your need-based aid might go up at a college that is more expensive. Okay? So that's where you get your cost of attendance, and you will subtract your expected family contribution, and that will equal your financial aid. Okay, so financial aid is a term that we use very loosely, and it actually refers to a lot of different things, okay? So it is the funds that a student and family help to pay for their college expenses. So the main types of financial aid that we're going to kind of touch on today briefly are scholarships, grants, loans, which are something we'll talk a little bit about more in detail, and then employment opportunities are often those are referred to as work-study programs. So those are the four main types of funding for college education. So scholarships, these are the things that probably parents know most about, or you hear the most about. Great thing about a scholarship is it does not have to be paid back. So it's not a loan. When that money is awarded to the student, that money is awarded and not expected to be repaid. So that's why they're awesome, right? Okay, so those are the things we want to look for. So we have two different main types of scholarships. The first one are institutional scholarships. And those are ones given by that particular college. So every college, whether they're state or private, has scholarship funds to award. Now, some schools have way more in scholarship funding to give out than other schools. Typically, state schools that are already affordable for a lot of families do not have as much money to hand out in scholarships. And that is why often during the college search process, we are encouraging you all to apply to private schools, even though the sticker price on them can sometimes be very scary. But those are the schools that many, many, many times have far more scholarships to award, where in the end, you're getting a private school education for a public school price because of the scholarships they were able to offer to kind of offset that cost. And so when the decision-making process comes, of course, if the funding isn't there, if the scholarships don't come in, that's a decision you'll make as a family, but we don't want you not to explore those options. Okay, so those are institutional scholarships, and they can be based on many things. Okay, so oftentimes we throw around the term merit-based aid. Merit-based aid can be anything from, obviously, your grades. Okay, so that's the one I think we most think about. Well, they're not going to get any merit-based aid but merit-based aid can be your test scores. Okay, my youngest son actually got a very nice size scholarship to go to school because of his SAT scores. And I didn't even know that existed, really. And it was surprising. So sometimes, the grades can help, the test scores can help, and then it can be something, a skill, a unique characteristic. So it can be for dance, it can be for band, it can be for art, it could be a leadership role. There are many schools that are religious-based that give community service scholarships. Okay, so don't think just because your son or daughter is not president of the class, or they don't have a 4.3 GPA, that there are not options out there for them to get merit-based aid. And that is also why in this college search process, we're encouraging students to look at schools that are, we call them safety to target schools, which means that that student's GPA exceeds the average GPA of that school. And the reason being that those are the schools where that student is very likely to get merit-based aid. Okay, if they want your student to come there because they see them as a very strong student in the academic realm or in the leadership realm, where they have a talent that they want, you will be surprised at all the money they might find for you, and it might be $1,000 here and $2,000 here and a $5,000, provost scholarship. But those all add up and can make it affordable for you guys. Okay, athletic, also one we hear a lot about. So those are Division I schools, Division II that can offer scholarships, but I will also give you this bit of advice. Division III schools can't offer athletic scholarships, but they can offer merit-based scholarships if they are athletic scholarships. So don't discount that if you have a child that is playing, and oftentimes, athletes, Division I is a very, very lofty goal for any high school athlete. And yes, we have many students that, that are able to play at that. But the majority of high school athletes are not going to be Division I athletes anywhere. So that is often an in at a school where the student may not get in just on their academics alone, but based on their athletic or even dance or fine arts skills, they might be admitted. So don't discount those as well. Outside scholarships, those are the things, you hear about all these unclaimed money, not being, used, and so I don't know where those are. I don't, because we get, our kids here apply to a lot of scholarships, so they can be through, we have many parents that work for companies that have their own scholarship programs, so maybe ask your HR department if you work for a medium to large size company. You might be surprised not knowing that it even existed. Civic and local organization, clubs have things that if you've been a member or your parents are a member or the student's been a member, religious organizations, and then the private listservs, as Mr. Borchard's going to talk about in a little bit more detail in a second, are what you kind of think of as finding scholarships outside. And then we have the grants. Okay, so there's a federal Pell Grant. This again is solely based on need. Yes.
I just want to back up 1 minute on this.
Yes.
Question on scholarship.
Okay.
If you are, if those scholarships are based truly on merit, on grades or test scores, do you still need to go and have the FAFSA?
Yes.
Is it still based on
Yes.
financial need at some level?
Yes.
It is.
So 99% of colleges that award merit-based aid that are maybe based on your daughter's dance ability. Okay, so you're thinking, well, it doesn't matter what we make or what we have to give. There still is a system within which financial aid is awarded, and so 99% of those colleges are still going to require that you are filling out the FAFSA. We get this a lot at Chaminade. Well, I'm not going to fill out the FAFSA, we're not going to qualify for any need-based aid. And that might be the case for a good portion of you, but a good portion of you will also have students that will qualify for merit-based aid, and so our answer is always going to be, you should fill out the FAFSA and let them decide. Okay, the worst thing that happens is you spent an afternoon filling out the FAFSA and maybe being a little stressed out, but in my opinion, it is well worth it. Yes.
Quick question.
Yes.
The FAFSA you say in January, senior year, are they looking at, let's say it was this year, were they looking at 2012?
Yes, so the FAFSA that I'm filling out in January is for the 2013
Next January.
Yes.
So you have to get your taxes done.
Yes. We'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. So let me move on, and then if we don't answer at the end, because we have a lot more of it, so I'm thinking we're going to answer some of these. Okay, and then I just want to touch on grants, which again are need-based. There is the federal Pell Grant that comes from the federal government, and again, that is need-based. And then in California, we have the Cal Grant, which again has a need-based and also has a criterion of GPA, which is 3.0 to qualify, and then there's another one that has lower, but So this is a pretty technical thing, but those are something, so the Cal Grant is due on March 1st typically, and that is something that is easy to do, takes 2 seconds, and so if you think your student qualifies as a senior, this is for seniors, then we will send out reminders to you and to them as well that this is due. Okay, I just said that all that, and I'm going to turn the time over to Mr. Fuller, who's going to talk about the ever-dreaded student loans.
Oh, I love loans. I'm still good friends with Sally. Her and I are buddies every month.
I just want to let you know, this PowerPoint will be posted on the counseling website on Blackboard by tomorrow or by the end of the day. So you don't have to worry about, you can come back and look at it later if you wish.
Okay. Alright, so there's a variety of different loans, and each one has its positives, and some have just a ton of negatives. And each also varies in the amount of award that you can receive. And you'll see as I kind of go through, some of them start out very low. They give a low limit at the beginning, and then as your student goes freshman to sophomore and then into junior and senior year, they allow the number to increase because they think that the longer that they're in college, the more likely they are going to graduate. The more likely they're going to graduate, the less likely they're going to default. So we definitely don't want anyone to default. The first loan you may see is the Federal Perkins loan. It is need-based, and it is a federal loan, which means that as Californians, you are at an automatic disadvantage because the amount of wage that you make here compared to the amount of wage you make in, say, Indiana or Alabama is completely different for the living expenses, right? So a typical, even say, teaching job here is almost double what some states make otherwise. So their ability to get federal loans in other states, and I know this because I'm from New Mexico and we qualified, is because of the federal and not the California limits. You notice the interest rate is 5%. That's actually pretty reasonable for a loan. And it does say interest will not accrue while students in school. Typically on these loans, so on the federal purchase and then on another loan, they get until 6 months after they graduate. So if they graduate in May, they have until that November time, and then they have to start paying off their loans. Okay, the federal direct staffer loans are going to be your two most popular loans. The first one is subsidized. Subsidized simply means that while your child is in school, the federal government will pay off the interest. Pretty sweet deal, actually. Now, on the subsidized loans, they do limit the first, second, and second years to pretty low limits, usually around $2,500 total, because that way they're kind of protecting their own interests. But as you keep going through junior and senior year, they can raise it to about $5,000 or $6,000, depending on the school and the state of the economy. Repayment does begin 6 months after graduation, and for both of these loans, it is your student's loan. It is not your loan. Yes, you are co-signing, but when you do these loans, please emphasize to your student, it is their fiscal responsibility to pay off their loans, right? They're getting it in their hands, it's their education. And then you have the unsubsidized staffer loan. So really, if the subsidized one does not quite meet the need, then they'll bring in the unsubsidized one. It is non-need based, and interest does accrue while in college. It is a small amount of interest, but typically if you pull about $10,000 by the end of the 4 years, you're paying about $13,000 and you haven't even started yet, okay? And as anyone who owns a house or a car or anything like that knows, interest builds up pretty quickly. So on an unsubsidized loan, you can expect to pay about $1.80 for every dollar you hold. So just kind of think about that. If you pay it off over the 10 years they typically give. Okay, federal direct, I'm sorry. These are actually, in terms of student loans, actually pretty good compared to what the others offer. All right, the Federal Direct Parent Plus loan. So this is where you sign off with your son or daughter to take the loan in your name as well. Okay? Non-need based, does require approval of your credit, because your son or daughter probably has 0 credit. And then repayment begins 60 days after final disbursement, which basically just means 60 days after that final payment. Not to get morbid or anything, but generally speaking, with the Stafford loans, the loans on the previous page, if your son or daughter would die before they paid off their loans, they, or you as the family, do not owe that money again. It is their loan, as I said. But with the Parent Plus loan, if they choose to default, if they can't pay it, or whatever, you still have to pay off their loan regardless. So just kind of keep that in mind. The Parent Plus loan really has a very high limit. I think you can pull up to $20,000, $30,000 a year, depending. Usually they just pull it to meet the rest of your financial need, and then you can go from there. So it can be a very expensive, very hefty loan, and it is in your name also. And then you can, if you choose not to go the federal school route, you can pull a private loan. That would be walking into Chase or walking into a credit union and saying, we'd like to pull a student loan. One thing to remember is that with the other loans, they allow your son or daughter to graduate first before they're expected to pay them off. With these, typically, the moment you pull them is the moment you have to start paying them back. So it's just like pulling equity on your mortgage or getting a car payment. You have to pay it right away. And then Federal Work Study. This is a pretty good program. It basically amounts to a part-time job to where your son or daughter will work at the college. I worked in the library. I'm sure some of the other counselors did wherever. I'm sure you, there you go, Mrs. Gallup worked in the library as well. There you go. So the nice thing is basically at the beginning of the semester, college wants the balance to be 0. This way they're allowing the balance to be anywhere from $500 to $2,000 depending on the school and depending on the job you would have. And then as they work, every 2 weeks or every month, depending on the pay, they walk into the business office, they hand you a paycheck, sign the paycheck, and you hand it right back to them. It's wonderful. You go, oh, still not getting paid. Awesome. Now, each college awards it differently, and it depends on the school. Some schools, like I said, have higher limits on that. Some have much lower limits. It really just depends on the opportunities they have and how much they're willing to pay per hour. Okay, so yes.
Is that generally better than just getting a regular on-campus job and then just paying for
It depends. I mean, myself, I actually decided to just go and get a job off campus. And I made a lot more money, and I was able to pay everything off much easier. But then what I did is instead, I had a savings account, and I put in as much as I would need for the work study for that next semester, and then I'd walk in at the beginning of the semester, pay out my work study, and then I wouldn't have to have an on-campus job. And then I had a little bit more spending cash. Yeah, so if your son or daughter wants to have a part-time off-campus job, more power to them as well. Just make sure that they can balance everything. So the sources of financial aid, of course, the federal government. That's going to be your primary source for the orphans loans and whatnot. With that, you have to complete FAFSA every single year. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. States usually have residency requirements. So that's Calgrant. Colleges and universities, as Mrs. Cowgill already talked about, there is merit and need-based aid depending on the student and the school. And then, of course, you have private sources. Mr. Portrait will talk about it as well. For senior parents, about every week you should be receiving an email from me with 5 or 6 scholarships that your son or daughter should be able to qualify for. A lot of them are just little essays. There's some if you're really tall, or some if you're really short. There's a whole vast array of them. So some of them are really not difficult to get. You just have to hope you actually, or that lucky lottery number pulled, if you will. Okay, how to apply? So, FAFSA, as we call it, it is the free application for federal student aid. If you are ever asked when filling out a FAFSA form to pay for something, you are on the wrong website. and you were giving your credit card information to someone that is probably going to try to ruin your credit. So it should be a free application. It's actually relatively easy at this point. It's all electronic. There's even a way now, and it's not on here, but they actually match you up to your tax forms. You enter in your social security numbers, they link everything together, it auto fills out, and call it a day. Alright, so general student info, have to have their social security number. They do need to be U.S. citizens generally. And then for the males, if they have turned 18, they should have registered with the Selective Service. Family info, they basically take your tax, your income, and other financial information, any assets, and if you are a dislocated worker, they do take that into account as well. Like Mrs. Calgill said, it maybe takes an afternoon or so. You can start filling it out January 1st, maybe wait until the 3rd or 4th, that's okay. If you do not have all of your specific information, and I think this kind of answers the questions you were wanting to ask, you do not have everything, estimate as close as you can. Take your final December paycheck stub, information from last year, if your job income is pretty much the same. Get as close as you possibly can and submit. You can always go back in and make adjustments and resubmit to those schools. The idea is being in the line to get the bowl of soup. Once you're in that line, even if you make adjustments, the soup will still be there as long as you're close to the front. Does that make sense? Alright. So, some of you will have special circumstances and they run the gamut. Call FAFSA. More than welcome to talk to us, but our responses will probably be call FAFSA because we do not know the answer to that. Change in employment status, medical expenses, death of a parent are some of the special circumstances that you can talk about. I don't know why that's on there. Okay. All right. Frequently asked questions. My taxes won't be completed until April. It's pretty typical, right? April 15th is the deadline, and I'm sure many of you walk into the post office at 11:59 and hand it in, or they do it online. Like I said, if you have not completed, you'll just indicate that you will file. Basically, you're stating that this is as close as I could get right now, and once I file, I will then change it. Once you have completed your taxes, be sure to update your FAFSA as well, and then just realize that your EFC, your expected family contribution, may change depending on if there are any drastic differences between what you did as you will file and then what you did as you have filed. Will my financial awards be the same every year? It could, but it could not. It all depends on the previous year's financial occurrences. So private business owners, if you had a rough year before, you'll probably get a lot of financial aid the next year, and then if you have a great year that year, it'll go back down again. So it really depends, and it is a variety of different factors, students in school, family size, everything like that. Okay, and then to end it, Mr. Portrait's going to talk about some of the typical grants and scholarship programs that our students see. Yes?
Just a quick question, kind of a one-foot-level question on FAFSA. There is something connected to it about getting a PIN, a PIN?
Correct.
And that you can do now, I mean, I did.
You can.
I'm not quite sure what the use of that is. Maybe
Sure. Your PIN is basically your electronic signature.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, so you're indicating to them, because everything's electronic now, so instead of having to get the papers, sign it, and mail it in, you just sign it with your pen and you're done.
It looks like you can do that now.
You can get your PIN now, that is correct.
A few days for it to come for them to.
Yeah, it depends on when you do it, but yeah, a couple days, couple weeks, depending, I guess you can get it done.
All right, so we're going to talk about some other options out there. One is what's called WUI, okay, Western Undergraduate Exchange. What this is there's 15 states on the western side that their students are eligible for WUI. Okay, WUI incorporates 150 different junior colleges and colleges that allow students to have reduced tuitions, okay, because they live for us here in California. So there is, I couldn't tell you all 150 off the top of my head, but there are a number of schools, and if you go on the website, you can definitely go in there and see which schools are part of WUI, okay? Every school is going to be a little bit different. Not everyone's going to get the same amount. There's going to be a certain number at certain schools on how many people can have WUI. All right, and so what happens is when you guys are registering or you're doing your application, there's going to be a box that says that you want to be eligible for the WUI. Okay, there's no other form you have to fill out. Some schools will require you to maybe fill out a little bit more information on their application, but there's nothing at the WUI site with this program in general. Okay, so when you apply, you mark it, and typically you're going to get that. If it is in a school that has a very limited number of WUI slots. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is one option, okay? And what this allows a lot of students to do is to attend out-of-state schools for almost in-state tuition. So this is a very helpful thing for some families that are like, well, we let our kid go out of state, our kid wants to go out of state, that's just too much money. Well, let's look and see if that school is part of WUI, and let's see about them going there and getting some help from them. Okay? So this is another example. This is Oregon State and Alabama. They're obviously not part of WUI, but what we wanted to show you here is that a lot of schools or institutions will have different programs for their students, a lot of times based off of merit, that allow students to go to their schools for near in-state tuition or even less. Okay, so we always encourage you guys, let's look at some of the options of different schools that are not in California, all right? And let's see what kind of programs they have, and if your student's doing very well academically, you can see that it does dramatically cut down the cost of their school. All right, but this is just another example of, outside of California, there are other options that do make it a little bit less. Okay. Frequently asked questions, how do I find other forms of aid? So we did allude to the scholarships, the private scholarships, and a whole bunch of other things like that. And we tell you about all this, and I'm sure some of you think, well, how do I find this stuff? How do I know if my kid's eligible for it? So we have a lot of links on our website, on Naviance, which I'm sure a lot of you guys know about. If any of you in here are freshman parents, we will be getting to that with you guys and your students' second semester. But Naviance provides a lot of great information. I'll show you some screenshots of that site and where you can find it. The other place is on Blackboard. Now, I know you guys don't have your own login information, but please talk with your kids and get their login information. You can go to the counseling page on Blackboard, and under external links, we have tons of links to different places, including FAFSA, a lot of the financial aid, in addition to the scholarships, grants, a merit-based search. There's a lot of other links there. So that's a great place to go to start your search. All right, so it's kind of hard to see. I'm sorry about that. What this is a picture of our Blackboard, like I was just telling you, and some of the links that are available to you there. So you can see at the very top, there's FAFSA. We got the Cal Grant link right there. We have the WUI. Down here is merit aid and scholarship search. Okay? Why is it getting? Go ahead, the screen. I was like, what's going on?
You touched it.
I know, it's touch screen. I didn't know that. All right. So we also have right down here FastWeb. This is a great search for you guys to search that abundance of scholarships out there. All that free money that no one uses. What you do is you go onto this site in addition to the scholarships.com, and what you're basically doing is you're creating a profile for your student. It's a great idea to have your student fill it out, where they put in all the information about themselves, and what these programs do is they will then search the database of scholarships. Okay, and it'll kick back the scholarships that your student might be eligible for. All right, and so what you'll do is you'll get an email, hey, look at this scholarship, hey, look at this scholarship. And as time goes on, your profile will stay in there, and every time a new scholarship comes up, it'll email you a notification and give you the link and whatnot for that particular scholarship. All right, it's never too early to start doing this. Have your students, if you're a freshman parent in here, have your student do it now. And then over time, they might build up all these applications that they're sending for the scholarships. And these scholarships can add up. You don't just get one. Okay, so some scholarships are going to be worth $500. Some might be worth $10,000. And so if they get 3 scholarships of $500, hey, that's $1,500 that you don't have to worry about. You never have to pay back. They can put it towards the books, whatever. Okay, so scholarships can add up. And it's never too early to start looking into those. Don't wait until you're a second semester junior, because you might be limited. All right, because there are some scholarships that are only for freshmen, only for sophomores, only for first semester juniors. Okay, so start taking a look early. Okay, this next one is on Naviance. Okay, so I was telling you guys on Naviance we do have some other searches. I didn't do that one.
Okay.
So, down here, you're going to have all the typical stuff down here. You're going to see where it says scholarships and money. Okay, so we have some different links there. This is also where we're going to be putting, anytime any of us hear about scholarships, we're going to be putting them on Naviance. You'll get a little notification, hey, so-and-so added this scholarship to the database. And you can come in here and you can search the database, you can see what's available. And for this little slide, this is a bunch of the scholarships that we have up there. Okay, and then over here, it might be hard to see, we have deadlines, so a lot of these scholarships have deadlines. Okay, so there are times where you might find a great scholarship, but the deadline was last month. Sorry, I gotta look. All right, we have how much the scholarships are worth, so some of these are like $1,500 to $1,000, $500, and whatnot, and then we'll have over here, if it's merit-based, okay, if it's need-based. And these X's, students like to look at these. These are ones that require an essay. Okay, you might get your students more likely to apply to some of them that don't require the essay. However, sometimes the ones that are going to be worth the most money are going to require an essay because they're a little bit more selective, obviously. Okay, so this will just give you a heads up on what they require. Let's see, what is that last one? Service required. So that's going to be if they're heavily involved with any of the community service, working in the community, maybe some of those leadership scholarships that we were talking about. Okay, this is just a part of the scholarships. There are a lot more on here. All right, you can also filter it. So you can filter, I only want to see merit-based, or I only want to see service-based. You can filter it out so you can only see the scholarships for different areas. Okay, financial aid websites. So a lot of these links are going to be on our Blackboard, if not all, I believe all of these are. Okay, so you can obviously Google search it, you're going to get it. But as Mr. Fuller was saying, if you're ever asked to spend money, you're probably on the wrong site. Okay, everything that we have on here is going to be free. All right, so keep in mind that you can always come on here, go to your student's Blackboard. We're going to have all the links there.
Yeah, and we'll post this PowerPoint too, just in case we don't have to frantically write all this down.
No.
So it will be on Blackboard as well. So we have a few minutes until 9, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Yes?
If we're looking at a Canadian college, does grants, loans, any of that apply or get not because it's out of?
Right. So any college that is out of the country will not qualify for the Pell Grants or the Cal Grants, which are only for California colleges. But there are some outside scholarships will.
How about federal loans?
No. Sorry. Yeah. Yes.
I just went to St. John's University with my older son, and they told us that there is a $5,000 scholarship across the board if you graduate from a Catholic high school. Is that normal here?
Yeah.
Yeah. St. Louis University just visited us last week. By the way, especially junior and senior parents, have your kids go to lunchtime visits with colleges. We can't emphasize that enough. I sat all by myself with St. Louis University's rep, and she was sitting there telling me that automatically they get $3,000 a year just coming out of the Catholic school, but they have all this great scholarship opportunity there. And I was the only one there to hear it. So have your kids go and meet the admissions people
Catholic college
Right.
offers that. The Marianas schools offer, the other Marianas colleges offer very nice scholarships. Chaminade in Hawaii offers, and then we have many that will offer, it tends to not be the most selective of the Catholic colleges, like Notre Dame's not going to do that. Not Notre Dame. Yes.
I have a question. You were talking earlier about the estimated family contribution, and I was talking to the financial aid officer of my son for college, he's a senior, and the financial aid, or the family contribution is designated a certain amount, and they had very small college grant, because they figured that our need was not that great, which the amount that said that we could contribute was obscene. They left us like $2,500 to pay our mortgage. And so I said, okay, great. So if my son writes lots of essays and he gets lots of scholarships, then, and also this school does not use loans, so there were not any loans computed in there. That was just this one grant thing. So if my son writes lots of essays and gets lots of scholarships, we can use offset our contribution, and they said no. They said that they will use it to offset any of his contribution, which is like he's in a little educational fund that his grandparents have set up for him, and then they would offset their contribution, which was a couple grand, and that was it. So what's, I mean, so I don't know what to do with that. I mean, so does that mean that after that?
Do you mind me asking what school this is? Because that is not typical.
Haverford.
Haverford. That is not typical because they just want their tuition paid. That doesn't, I mean, I'm just going to go out there and be wild and say that doesn't sound like 100% correct information to me.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So my question would be.
So you might want to talk to somebody else in the
And
office.
I also talked to Penn, Penn did the same thing, they said that they would never decrease the estimated financial family contribution. They said that they would always come up with their, whatever the student contribution was, whether it was for loans or work study or whatever, or their, and then it would come off of the school's contribution, but they would never diminish the family contribution. That's not your experience.
That has never been my experience. I'm just being totally honest with you. With merit-based aid, no matter where it's coming from, if it's coming from Haverford or it's coming from Coca-Cola or it's coming from the Elks Lodge, what you're choosing now, the way they distribute it might be that it's going, so if the student has an expected contribution, that check that comes in that's merit-based from a scholarship might go directly to your child, but then you can take it away from your child so that you're putting it in the fund. And if you paid $20,000 for them to go this semester, then when that money comes in, you just have your child sign that over to you. How they distribute it might be what they're saying, not
Or maybe it's an order of preference, maybe it's a child, and then it's.
Correct.
They also said that they would take, like, they would give the child like 100% up to like a couple $1,000s.
Yes.
And then they split it 50-50, they did a share 50%, and the child's contribution 50%.
Right.
And that was it, maybe there was too many something.
Well, typically, a school is always going to cover the student's expected contribution before they cover the parent's expected contribution.
So maybe because it's left after school.
Yes.
After school.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't sound right that if there's money left over, if your son is going to give it to you, then you can use it to,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that they're 100% giving you like the whole scenario correctly. Yes.
When I was a student, my parents did not live in this country. Does that separating your child from the parents somehow after they're 18, not how do we make it independent so it, the parental financial does not
You
affect?
can't, unless they're emancipated. Like after they've attended school for what, 2 years?
It's difficult.
It's very difficult
They have
to
to prove
prove,
that they've been living without you and financially.
and no financial support has been given by the family. They would have to have a job, they would have to
So
provide like an
they have to
income
be
statement, yes.
Kind of completely independent.
Yeah, for undergraduate students, it's very difficult. Once you become a graduate student, there is no more expected family contribution. So it is very different, but once undergraduate, it's very
So
difficult.
even if you don't claim them as dependents
Correct.
and so on, you
If
still.
they've lived in your house and you give them money, even if it's cash, they're going to know they don't have a job. They're going to know they don't have the means to support themselves. So it's very difficult for that reason. Otherwise, everyone would do it. Okay.
Never having seen the FAFSA
what I consider, I take it would also take into consideration what you may have saved, let's say in a 529 account. But does it, when it looks at the family, does it only look at the parents? In other words, if that 529 was in the grandparents' name, would it be considered as part of quote family support?
Unless you're held in trust and, like, unless you have, your name is on that account. It's only things that are linked to your social security number.
Right, so if that 529 was being done by a grandparent, and let's say there was $300,000 in that account, that would not be considered in family support under FAFSA.
I think so, but you may want to talk to FAFSA or CSS profile, which is the other person, just to make sure.
Well, yeah, but the other thing you want to be careful of is if it's been set up in trust or set up attached to the child's name with that becomes the student's expected contribution. And so that can increase the student's part. It may decrease yours, but it will increase theirs. So just be careful. Yes?
On that same line, do 529s count against you when you actually apply for financial aid?
So then I don't even know what 529 is.
Depends on the way it's set up.
Is that retirement?
If you're looking at a merit-based application, you have
I think it depends on how you set it up, as if you're paying taxes ahead of time or before.
You know, generally speaking, on retirement, this is just really generalization, but generally speaking, your retirement assets, like your 401k plan, profit sharing plan, and even your kids' IRA, if they opened one day and they were working summer jobs, that's protected from consideration. And depending on your age as a parent, like if you're over a certain age, like 50-something, as it says on this sheet, then there's a certain amount of those 529 plans are sheltered too, but not all of it. That $300,000 example, you're not going to ship. You're not going to shelter that. Some part of it,
She knows what she's tax free.
yeah. I'm not getting tax free.
No, but they ask very specifically on the form, and they will list every account that you have to disclose. So it's pretty clear on what they're asking you to disclose.
If a child has a grandparent who is willing to pay some of the college costs, there's nothing to keep the grandparent from writing a check for your child's housing or books or something else, just not where it's tied to their social security number.
Yes.
Can I elaborate a little bit more on the 529?
Sure.
The 529 is basically a college savings plan, and in some cases the grandparents included, depending if they put it in their social security name, they have a listed beneficiary. And usually it's a grandchild or multiple grandchildren. That beneficiary can also be transferred to a sibling or whomever. The caveat with 529 is you must distribute that money at a certain point in time for higher education. If you don't, you ultimately put tax on the remainder. So what happens is you can take the money out, keep evidence and file it on your tax return. So the child, if they're 18 and they're a beneficiary, they can put it on their tax return. If the parents' income is so high that they're not going to get benefit for college tuition, it's kind of on your financial situation, your tax structure.
Yeah, and that's why, again, it's just always best to ask the person that's most familiar with your particular financial setup.
A general question, do they take into consideration the FAFSA, do they take into consideration the number of dependents you have, or do they just look at the big number at the bottom and don't take into account? This family has 2 kids, this other family has 4, because your financials are quite different?
Yes.
Family size.
It's family size, and then the other thing that we didn't even really mention here, there's something called the CSS profile that is primarily used by private schools, and so that is additional information to the FAFSA, and they actually consider the number of students that you have in college at one time. So if you have, not to scare anyone, but we had 6 kids in college at one time between my husband and I, between graduate and undergraduate, and 4 of them bang, 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 bang. So by the time the youngest one went, he was almost free. so we had 3 kids in undergraduate education. When Zach applied, our expected family contribution was almost nothing because because of that. So the CSS profile takes that into consideration, where the FAFSA does not.
So the FAFSA does
The
not.
FAFSA is more general. Your expected family contribution will be hinged on your dependents, and that obviously you have dependent on the support, but it's not as detailed as the CSS profile.
Because we got places that didn't take into account.
Correct.
It's 9 o'clock, so to respect those of you who have to go to work, we're going to stop our formal presentation at this point. We will be down here if you have questions. Let us know. If any of you parked in the parking lot behind me, drive up the driveway all the way around